Hello there and welcome to the channel. My name is Simon, and in this video I'm going to be talking to you about 5 mistakes that you will want to avoid when pruning your roses. But before I start, there will be one caveat that you will wish to know about, and also I will have 2 amazing pieces of horticultural advice for you regarding growing roses, which I will leave both at the end of this video. Chat it. Flipping egg.
Mistake number 1. Use sterilized blades.
Yes, indeed, sterilizing your blades. Now, roses can be a never-ending well of pests and disease, and as such you should always sterilize your cutting blades. If you have a nice pair like these Ferricos here, you can swap out these ones and these ones so that you know there's absolutely no contamination of viruses, bacteria, fungal spores that can be transferred from one plant to another plant to another plant. So if you don't have spare blades, or your secateurs do not allow for spare blades, then you sterilize them. There are 2 ways to sterilize them. First way isn't the best way, and that is heat sterilization. I used to stick my blades over the old gas burner back in the day. Nowadays, just do a diluted solution of bleach and wipe these blades off. That way you can be confident that you're not transferring diseases from plant to plant to plant as you're pruning them. No one ever does that. No one sterilizes their blades. It's a big thing, big thing.
Mistake number 2. Prune your roses at the right time.
Yes, indeed, timing of the cutting of your roses. Now, there are 2 times a year that are typically used to prune your roses. The first one is November, the second is March. But to be fair, if you cut any of your roses in November, then you're going to be removing the spent flower heads, and that means you'll also be removing the colourful flower hips, which not only do they provide a ornamental value throughout the winter, they also provide a food source for insects, mammals and birds. But that's not really the big problem. I'll explain further. Now, traditionally the lovely Victorian gardeners used to have a little saying. It was the 3rd outward facing bud in the 3rd week of the 3rd month. So you're looking at the middle to the end of March, and that's when they used to cut their roses. But really that's mostly for Floribunda and hybrid tea rose. Now, if you're cutting Rambler roses, then Rambler roses are cut immediately after flowering, and that is because they flower on the previous season's wood. If you cut those plants back in March, then you're going to be cutting off last year's wood. You're not going to get any flowers on it. Now, the lovely RHS, my favourite horticultural society, they recommend, with regards to climbing roses which flower on new season's wood, to cut those in the autumn and in the winter, and there will be a problem with that, which I will discuss in a bit. So if you do that, which you can, you're perfectly entitled to if you want to follow the RHS advice. But if you cut them in November, so we're still talking about climbing roses, then once again you will lose the rose hips. There's no problem cutting them back in March as you would. Now, while we're on the subject of cutting, when it comes to cutting back shrub roses, again, cut them in March, but you only give them a light trim, because we will be going into the detailing of how to prune a rose shortly. But if you prune at the wrong time of year for these plants, say end of summer, early autumn, you'll get a lot of very soft growth that will come off the plant, because they are vigorous plants, and that soft growth is a magnet to biting insects. And furthermore, come the first frost, all that new soft growth that you've just created by cutting it is just going to be cut back with the cold weather. So all the energy, all the starches, all the carbohydrates, all the sugars that were invested by the plant into that new growth, that's gone. The plant cannot get that back. So come the spring, plant has less energy to produce your lovely summer rose flowering display.
Mistake number 3. Incorrect pruning technique.
So, as I said before, the Victorians said always cut to the third outward facing bud, but as I also said, that is for Floribunda and hybrid tea roses. But it's not just those sort of cuts you'll be making. You'll be removing any weak growth. Take all that out. You'll be taking any crossing branches or stems, because they can rub together, they can create wounds, and those wounds can be infection points, again, for fungal infections, bacteria, viruses. You also want to remove remove stems that go back into the shrub. You want to open it up, have a goblet shape to the rose. And I'm talking about Floribundas, hybrid teas, because that will improve the airflow, and improved airflow reduces the incidence of fungal infections. Now, I'll be repeating about fungal infections because, as we all know, roses are an absolute nightmare for fungal infections. You get black spot rust, mildew. Talk about that a bit later in this video.
Mistake number 4. Cut correctly.
So when you make a cut into a branch, you're exposing the live tissue to whatever's in the air around it. So that opens up the plant to, again, risk of particularly fungal infections, viruses, bacteria. So when you're making a cut, you want to do a angled cut as best you can. You want a flat cut like that, because you know it does rain a lot in the UK, and if you get water droplets landing and forming on top of an open cut, then that will increase the risk of fungal infections getting into the wound. So you always do an angled cut. Furthermore, you always cut when it's dry, which is one of the reasons why cutting in November is not a fantastic idea, because notoriously the weather in November and early winter is wet, damp, foggy, you know, it's just humid, it's horrible. So cut when it's dry, and which brings us back to middle to the end of March. Typically it is very dry, so avoid cutting roses when rain is due. Cut on a dry day as best as you can. You know, it rains every day at the moment. And just one more thing. Now, if you are finding the information in this video useful, or perhaps just mildly amusing and you'd like to pass it on, then by all means press the like button. It supports this channel immensely and helps us do what we do. Don't forget, you can also click onto the subscription button. Subscription is absolutely free, and you can unsubscribe at any time. It doesn't cost you anything, and if you want to be notified whenever we publish a new video, then all you need to do is click on that notification bell. Anyway, let's continue to find out what old Boyle Belt has to say. Come the spring, fungal spores in leaf litter are often bounce back into the air. So if you've got rain due and you've made some cuts on your roses, the rain's going to come down, it's going to hit any leaves, spores are going to fly up and they can land in infection points on your rose. So don't cut your roses if rain is due. Secondly, when you're making that cut above a node, which is where you've got a little bud coming out, you only cut just a wee bit above it. If you cut it, say, mid-node between two buds, you can get quite a lot of dieback coming through, and sometimes that dieback will pass through the node below and keep going down to the wood. And then all that sort of like dead wood then becomes an infection point for fungal infection. So cut correctly, cut at the right point, which you'll see is just above a node, and avoid cutting when a rainfall is due. All good points that they used to teach us at college, but no one talks about anymore.
Mistake number 5. Not doing your due diligence.
Indeed, words to live by. Now, when you go down to your local plant centre, nursery, garden centre, wherever it is, you'll typically be looking at a wide range of very healthy looking plants, and it's in the producers, the commercial horticulturists interest to make sure they look healthy, so they'll all be sprayed with insecticides, fungicides. So once they go out on display and you're looking at them, they all look absolutely fine. But the problem is, once you get them home and you're not spraying them, then you'll start seeing these fungal infections and what have you creeping in. So it is in your interest to do your research and check the varieties first. Make sure you are purchasing cultivars that are known to be strongly disease resistant, pest resistant. Otherwise you're going to be fighting a losing battle, because some of these plants are absolutely shocking, especially the older cultivars that were being produced last century, when the sole interest of the grower was to produce a very interesting, lush, large scented flower. And pest and disease resistance will not even bother with that in those days. And to be fair, insecticidal chemicals were absolutely rampant everywhere. You could spray pretty much anything on them and not worry about it too much, although you might get yourself a bit of damage if you're not too careful. So there you go. You can't just go and pick a rose out of a bunch of roses and think it's going to be all right because it looks all right. Then chances are it's not. It's going to be rubbish. So always do your research first. Always check pest and disease resistance in the cultivars you are purchasing. It saves so much problem further down the line. So there you have it. 5 mistakes that you should try and avoid when pruning your roses. Now, I said to you about a caveat. Now, back in the day, the Royal Horticultural Society, they did a trial between roses, and what difference would it make if you pruned them technically as I have outlined in those earlier points, and whether you just got a brush cutter and just trimmed all the top of them off? And would it really make a difference in how the plant grows? Well, to be fair, they did that 1 year, then they did a count up of the blooms, and to be fair, both lines of roses gave up pretty much the same amount of blooms. Now, that's all the information I know about that trial, because pest and disease wasn't mentioned. And to be fair, if one side was getting pest and disease and the row next to it is just over there, then let's be honest with you, it's just going to go into those and they'll still get it anyway. But there you go. Pruning, it's made to sound very important, and the reasons behind the way we do things with regard to pruning roses is it makes sense, it's good stuff, but at the end of the day, if you've got a lot of roses, is it really worth the effort of just doing all those fine cuts, outward facing bud, remove the centre, remove weak, disease, damaged, dying stems, or is it just a load of old rubbish? Well, apparently RHS trials say you are wasting your time. Anyway, so that's one caveat. And now for the amazing gardening advice. Right, your roses, if you have roses that have these diseases, come the autumn, the leaves will drop off, the leaves will fall on the floor, and the diseases are also in the leaves that are on the floor, waiting to come out come the spring. So it is in your to your advantage to remove the old leaves away to reduce the amount of fungal spores that are going to be lying on the ground below your roses, waiting to come up and get back onto your roses. The second piece of information is this: if you've removed all the roses, I mean, you could break it all up or use a blower, but you're blowing it to somebody else's roses. In the spring, put down a thick mulch, and that will also cover any fungal spores that are lying on the ground. You'll need like 2 to 3 inches thick to prevent it from happening. Always be aware that when you're putting a mulch around the roses, is that the mulch does not touch the stem, because again, that can weaken the epidermis of the stem and allow infections to get in there. So always leave a gap at the stem so you still get airflow around there. And if you're using products like a blended farmyard manure from the shops, that's also been sterilized. Should have gone through a heat sterilizer too. So you're using a sterile product rich in nutrients that also acts as a great cover for hiding fungal spores that might be on the soil surface. So there you have it. That's all my information regarding roses, pruning roses. And if you've got anything you'd like to add, if there's anything that I missed, because that can happen, then put that in the comments. We would love to hear from you. Anyway, thank you for watching this far. Hopefully we're going to see you in the next video. Goodbye. Right, now, just before you go, if you want to see more content, more behind the scenes stuff, and images that I've taken of some weird freaky plants over the years, then you're in luck, because we've created an Instagram page. So you can find the link in our description, you can find the link on our main page, and if I'm clever enough I might be able to get a link somewhere up there. Anyway, thank you for watching, and if you want to see more YouTube stuff, then check out this video here. That's quite a good one. And if it doesn't float your boat, then another one right there. And enjoy these while I've still got the strength, imagination and aptitude to make them. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.